How did Civil War battles end? How did both sides communicate with each other? How were the dead gathered and buried? We will examine these questions using the actual exchanges between General Grant and General Beauregard following the Battle of Shiloh. April 6, 1862, Southwest Tennessee. The Confederate Army of the Mississippi surprises General Grant's Army of the Tennessee at Pittsburg Landing. Grant is driven back towards Pittsburg Landing on the river. However, overnight reinforcement from General Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio reforms the Union lines. The following day, April 7th, the Union lines drive the Confederates back across the ground they had gained the previous day. Confederate General Beauregard forms a defensive line to cover the path for retreat, and he retreats back southward towards Corinth, Mississippi. The following day, April 8th, the Confederate Army is a few miles distant from Grant. Looking back, we sometimes wonder why wouldn't Grant just march south and destroy the Army of the Mississippi? It's already half broken. Why wouldn't he just do that? People also ask these questions about other big engagements like Gettysburg. After Lee's stalled attacks on July 2nd and 3rd, why wouldn't General Meade just counterattack on July 4th and, quote, finish off, end quote, the Confederates? The answer has less to do with armchair strategy and more to do with the actual experience of being on the field. Both sides are totally exhausted after a big battle. The casualties, the physical exhaustion, and the psychological exhaustion are just too much after a day or 2 days, or think about Gettysburg, which is a full 3 days. Back at Shiloh, on the evening of April 7th, many of these outfits on the field have been engaged for 2 whole days. Everyone is just exhausted on both sides. In addition to the human factor, another very practical limiter is ammunition. A Civil War cartridge box may fit 40 rounds. Armies only have so much ammunition, and both sides are far from resupply. At some point, you have to wait for wagon trains or supply boats to bring more ammunition. On April 8th, the day following the Confederate retreat, General Beauregard sends a messenger to Grant's headquarters under a flag of truce. The messenger carries a letter. This Shiloh example is an excellent example of generals from both armies communicating with each other after the guns go silent. Beauregard's letter reads, Sir, at the close of the conflict of yesterday, my forces, being exhausted by the extraordinary length of time during which they were engaged with yours on that and the preceding day, and it being apparent that you had received and were still receiving reinforcements, I felt it my duty to withdraw my troops from the immediate scene of conflict. Under these circumstances, in accordance with usages of war, I shall transmit this under a flag of truce, to ask permission to send a mounted party to the battlefield of Shiloh for the purpose of giving decent interment to my dad. Certain gentlemen wishing to avail themselves of this opportunity to remove the remains of their sons and friends, I must request for them the privilege of accompanying the burial party, and in this connection I deem it proper to say I am asking only what I have extended to your own countrymen under similar circumstances. Respectfully, General, your obedient servant, G.T. Beauregard, General commanding the Army of the Mississippi. The next day, April 9th, Grant sends a request to General Beauregard, bringing his own messenger under a flag of truce to the Confederate camp. Grant's letter to Beauregard reads, Your dispatch of yesterday is just received. Owing to the warmth of the weather, I deemed it advisable to have all the dead of both parties buried immediately. Heavy details were made for this purpose, and now it is accomplished. There cannot, therefore, be any necessity of admitting within our lines the parties you desire to send on the grounds asked. I shall always be glad to extend any courtesy consistent with duty, and especially so when dictated by humanity. I am, General, very respectfully, your obedient servant. U.S. Grant, Major General, commanding the Army of the Tennessee. It's important to understand that although North and South are engaged in a terrible war with horrific losses, we have so many examples that show that there isn't a personal animosity that many today might assume. Their letters were cordial and respectful. In this example at Shiloh, Union soldiers on April 8th had spent the day burying the fallen from both sides. The end of the Battle of Shiloh shows us possible conclusions to a Civil War battle. The winner on the field, following proper protocol, would bury the dead of both sides, as Grant did on April 8th. Or the two sides could arrange a truce and the two armies would enter the same area to collect and bury the dead, as Beauregard proposed under a flag of truce. And this is an example of how a Civil War battle might end.